Welcome to the second video on light. Don't worry, we are not going to be going into all the calculations that we talked about light when we did in chemistry, but we're going to review some of the basics of light. So light is in a form of electromagnetic energy, and it takes the shape of waves. In chemistry, we learned the term wavelength. And wavelength is the distance from peak to peak in a wave of light. Okay? And it's the wavelength that determines what color, or what type, not just color, but what type of energy you have. So if you take a look at this picture, this is the electromagnetic spectrum. Unfortunately, you do not have color. So perhaps you want to write in the colors. If you remember, in the electromagnetic spectrum, the types of energy vary by the amount of energy they have. On this side of the table is the electromagnetic part of the spectrum that has lots of energy, or high energy. And on this part of the spectrum is the part of the electromagnetic spectrum that has low energy. And you'll see in the middle of the spectrum is the visible light spectrum, which is the light that humans can see. And here you see we have, if you remember Roy G. Biv, so red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. And you'll notice that on this side, violet has the most energy of visible light, and red has the least energy. That also means that violet has the shortest wavelength, and that red has the longest wavelength. Do you need to know that? No. I would know that violet has the most energy, and that red has the least. So like we just said, the visible light spectrum contains the colors of light that humans can see. And it includes the colors of light, or the wavelengths, that plants can absorb, and they can use the energy that they absorb from these different colors of light to drive photosynthesis. Now you may be saying, but miss, we don't just shine red light on a plant. Well, sunlight is white light, and white light contains the entire visible spectrum. So light from the sun contains violet light, contains green light, contains blue light. It actually also contains UV rays, and those are the things that cause people's skin to burn. When you put on sunscreen, you're protecting your skin from UV rays, not the visible light spectrum. But the plants absorb the visible light spectrum and use it to power photosynthesis. So the question that we're trying to answer through this PowerPoint is, how do plants absorb light? And what colors of light are best for photosynthesis? And plants absorb light through the use of pigments. Okay, pigments are substances that absorb visible light. An example of a pigment that's not in plants is melanin. Melanin is in the skin of people. People who have darker color skin have more melanin than people that have lighter color skin. In humans, melanin also protects people who have darker color or more melanin. It also protects their skin from the damaging UV rays of the sun. But in general, not that you need to know that or write it down, but in general, pigments are substances that can absorb visible light. And we talked about this in chem a little bit, okay? But the light you see is the light that's reflected by the substance. All other colors of light are absorbed. So for example, here we have the green granum in the chloroplast, okay? And the reason why these granum, or the chloroplast, or plant cells in general, appear green is that when you shine white light on them, okay, they absorb all the colors of light except for green. And then green is the color that you see. The question that people ask is like, well, what makes it reflect green light and absorb all the other colors of light? And it has to do with the material, what the substance is made out of. Whatever the chemical makeup, or the atom's arrangement in that molecule, in this case, we'll see it's going to be chlorophyll, it allows it to only absorb, here it's red, yellow, blue, and violet, and reflect green. Now, the main pigment in plants, okay, that absorbs light is chlorophyll. Okay, and chlorophyll is located in the thylakoids of the chloroplast. Okay, we're going to talk about that a lot on Monday. Okay, there are two types of chlorophyll, chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B. Chlorophyll A is the main pigment, and chlorophyll B is an accessory pigment. They're both green in color, but they absorb different wavelengths of light slightly better. And if you're going to take a look at the structure, okay, chlorophyll it's a protein, so chlorophyll is a protein, okay, and it contains these groups here. This is the part of the molecule, it's called a porphyrin ring, that absorbs light. And then it has this hydrocarbon tail that allows it to be stuck in the membrane of the chloroplast. Because remember, the chloroplast is composed of a phospholipid bilayer, and in order for things to be embedded in the membrane, they need to be hydrophobic. The only difference between chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B is this part right here. Do you need to know that? Absolutely not. Plants also have other accessory pigments. One is called carotenoids, and there's another one called xanthophyll. And they're actually what make the plants different colors during the fall, so why they turn orange and why they turn yellow. I'm going to talk about that later, not now. But they absorb different wavelengths of light compared to chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B. So now the question is, which colors of light does chlorophyll absorb best? Well, to figure this out, what we could use is a spectrophotometer. And if you remember from our enzyme lab, a spectrophotometer is a machine that sends light through pigments, in this case it's pigments, and measures either how much light is absorbed or how much light is transmitted. And you could, if you wanted to stick in reflected here, reflected is the same sort of means transmitted. So the light can either be absorbed or transmitted, and transmitted is really the same as saying reflected. So if we look at this setup, we're sort of like looking at a pictorial representation of a spectrophotometer. In this test tube here, we have chlorophyll, and chlorophyll is green in color, or it appears green. And in this situation, we have where it's in the spec, and we're shining green light into the chlorophyll solution. And what you see is that if you shine green light in a spec into chlorophyll, it has a high transmittance or a low absorbance, which means that this green substance is not absorbing this green light, it's reflecting it. And that indicates that chlorophyll absorbs very little green light. Now if you look at this case, where instead of shining green light, we're shining blue light, you'll see in this case that this has low transmittance, and instead a lot of the blue light is being absorbed. And what that means is that chlorophyll can absorb blue light really well, but it can't absorb green light very well. So now the question that we're moving to next is, what does this mean for photosynthesis, in terms of the color of light and which colors of light are best for photosynthesis? Alright, well this is showing the entire absorption spectra for all the different pigments. Let's look at chlorophyll A. So and unfortunately for you, you do not have color, so you're going to have to write in your colors. Okay, I apologize. So if we look at chlorophyll A, the chlorophyll A graph, which is green in color, peaks at between like blue and indigo, and it also peaks again at around, not as high, but around like orange or red. And it's extremely low in green and yellow. So what this means is that at the violet or the red, really the blue and indigo, and looking at chlorophyll A, for the orange and red, it absorbs those colors of light the best. What that means is the most energy is available for photosynthesis if it's in indigo light or like orange-red light. And there's not much absorption in the green, if you're shining green light on the plant. And if you remember, that's because since the plants are green, they reflect green back out and not absorb you. And you can see the other pigments. Chlorophyll B is not, it has pretty much the same spectrum. It's like slightly shifted over, but it's still good in the indigos and purples and blues and the red and orange, and just not as good in the green and yellow. And you'll see the carotenoids here. They're actually a little bit better as you get to the lighter blues, but it drops off pretty quickly once it gets into the green. So again, what is the point of this? Is that chlorophylls absorb best like purplish blue light. And they also absorb pretty well orange, yellow, red light. But they don't absorb green or yellow light really well. So what that means is that green and yellow are bad colors of light they don't power photosynthesis well. And that violet is the best, and that orange and red is also good for powering photosynthesis because these pigments can absorb those colors of light well. We're now going to look at an experiment that was done before spectrophotometers existed that was able to determine which colors of light were best at powering photosynthesis or providing energy for photosynthesis. This experiment's a little bit complicated. You're going to have to stick with me here and probably replay it a couple times. So in this experiment, Eagleman grew algae and then shined using a prism all the colors of light along the algae. So in this area, the algae was being exposed to red, and in this area, the algae was being exposed to purple light. Okay, now what you need to know is that when algae do photosynthesis, when they're doing photosynthesis well, they produce oxygen. Oxygen is a product of photosynthesis. On these algae, he grew some aerobic bacteria, which need to use oxygen to produce energy to grow in respiration. Well, we just took a quiz on. And he let it sit, okay, and he let the algae do photosynthesis. And what he noticed is the bacteria accumulated or lived the most in the violet and blue light, as well as the orange and red light. But there was the least bacteria, the bacteria died in the green and yellow light. And the reason for that is that here, where the algae was being exposed to the green-yellow light, okay, since green and yellow light could not be absorbed, it didn't do photosynthesis well, and therefore it didn't release O2. So here, let me repeat it one more time. Because the algae could not absorb the green and yellow light that well, okay, they couldn't do photosynthesis. They didn't have energy to do photosynthesis, and therefore they didn't produce that much oxygen, and then the bacteria couldn't grow here because they need oxygen to produce energy. However, in the violet light and the red light, okay, because red and violet are good at powering photosynthesis, or can be absorbed by chlorophyll well, they were able to do photosynthesis well, able to produce oxygen, and then the bacteria were able to live on the oxygen that they produced. But in the green, again, because green light is not absorbed well by chlorophyll, photosynthesis couldn't occur, not much oxygen was produced by the algae, and then the bacteria, they died in the green spectrum. The conclusion from this experiment was that violet, blue, and red portions of the spectrum are most effective at driving photosynthesis, and they found out the reason is that chlorophyll can absorb those wavelengths of light well, and not the green very well. If you didn't write all over this slide, you should go back and write all over it. If there's one thing you should have learned from this lesson, it's that chlorophyll, which is the pigment that plants have in their chloroplasts, absorbs light, and it absorbs red and blue-violet light the best, and green light the worst. And the reason why that is that chlorophyll reflects green light, that's why it appears green, and absorbs all the colors of light. Monday in class, we're going to jump into the parts of photosynthesis. There are only two. The light reactions, okay, which we're going to see capture energy in the sun, okay, and into a form that the plant can use. And then the Calvin cycle, which we're going to see is going to use the energy that was made in the light reactions from the sun and use it to reduce carbon dioxide to a 3-carbon compound that's going to be used to make glucose. Okay? We're only going to have 2 episodes. Episode 1 on Monday and episode 2 on Tuesday. And then we're going to do some practice lab activities and sort of summarize the relationship between photosynthesis and respiration. But that is the plan for next week. Don't be absent. Come to school. And I'll see you next week. Answer the guided questions.